What if the two things human beings want most are also the two things quietly destroying them? Freedom and belonging. Modern societies spend enormous energy chasing one while slowly starving from the absence of the other. In countries like the United States and Canada, people are taught from childhood to become independent, self-reliant, unique, emotionally autonomous. Meanwhile, in societies like India and China, people are often taught something very different. Stay connected, honor the family, think collectively, sacrifice for the group, belong before you separate. And strangely, both sides are suffering. One side is drowning in loneliness, the other is drowning in emotional pressure and dependence. Maybe you've noticed this already. You meet people in highly individualistic societies who seem free on the outside but emotionally empty inside. They have careers, privacy, freedom, apartments, independence, yet nobody to truly lean on emotionally. Then you meet people in deeply family-oriented societies who are constantly surrounded by people, relatives, obligations, emotional involvement, yet secretly feel trapped, emotionally dependent, unable to fully become themselves. You probably think suffering comes from personal weakness, trauma, or bad luck. But by the end of this video, you'll understand something much deeper. Every society creates its own psychological prison. Too much freedom creates loneliness. Too much belonging creates emotional suffocation. Too much individuality weakens connection. Too much dependence weakens individuality. And modern humanity is swinging wildly between these two extremes without realizing it. There is something deeply ironic about human beings. We often spend our lives longing for the exact conditions that would eventually exhaust us. A lonely person dreams about community. A trapped person dreams about freedom. An emotionally isolated man in New York fantasizes about large family dinners, cousins laughing together, grandparents living nearby, people checking in on him emotionally. Meanwhile, a young woman in Delhi or Shanghai may fantasize about living alone in another country, making independent decisions, escaping family expectations, finally breathing psychologically. Each side looks at the other and imagines salvation. But every culture hides pain differently. To understand this, we first need to understand two invisible systems shaping human psychology all over the world: individualism and collectivism. Individualistic societies teach people to see themselves primarily as independent individuals. In these cultures, personal freedom, self-expression, autonomy, ambition, uniqueness, and individual achievement are deeply valued. People are encouraged to find themselves, build their own identity, pursue personal goals, and become emotionally self-sufficient. Success becomes personal responsibility. Collectivistic societies, on the other hand, teach people to see themselves primarily as part of a larger social unit: family, community, religion, or group identity. In these cultures, harmony, loyalty, duty, sacrifice, interdependence, and social belonging are emphasized. People are often taught to think not only about themselves, but about how their actions affect family and community. Neither system is entirely right. Neither system is entirely wrong. Both are trying to solve one ancient human problem: how should human beings live together? And both systems create psychological strengths and psychological suffering. Modern American culture increasingly worships individuality almost like a religion. From childhood, people hear messages like, "Be yourself, follow your dreams, don't depend on anyone, create your own life, stand out, build your personal brand." At first, this sounds empowering, and in many ways, it is. Freedom is beautiful. The ability to choose your path, career, partner, beliefs, identity, and lifestyle is a remarkable privilege. Highly individualistic societies produced enormous innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity, scientific breakthroughs, and personal liberties precisely because people were encouraged to think independently. But freedom carries a hidden psychological cost. Because once identity becomes fully individualized, Suffering becomes individualized too. If your life falls apart, you blame yourself. If your relationship fails, you blame yourself. If you feel anxious, lonely, depressed, or disconnected, you quietly wonder whether something is wrong with you. Modern freedom creates enormous internal pressure. A man may sit alone in a beautiful apartment in Toronto or Manhattan, earning good money, enjoying privacy, traveling internationally, and still feel profoundly emotionally empty. Nobody may realize he is struggling because modern suffering often looks functional. He still works, smiles, posts online, goes to the gym, replies to emails. But internally, he feels emotionally unseen. And this is one of the hidden tragedies of highly individualistic societies. People can become extremely functional while emotionally starving. The American dream gave people independence, but sometimes independence quietly became isolation, and social media intensified this psychological burden even further. Because now individuality itself is no longer enough. People must also perform individuality, curate it, display it, market it. Your life becomes content, your personality becomes branding, your emotions become presentation, and the nervous system never fully rests. People constantly compare themselves to strangers online, their bodies, their relationships, their careers, their lifestyles, their happiness. The modern mind becomes trapped in endless self-evaluation. Am I attractive enough, successful enough, interesting enough, unique enough, productive enough, happy enough? Human beings were never designed to carry this much self-definition alone. For most of history, identity came from tribe, religion, village, family, and shared social roles. Today, millions of people must invent themselves almost entirely from scratch. And while this sounds liberating philosophically, psychologically it becomes exhausting. Who am I? What should I become? What if I fail? What if I waste my life? What if nobody truly loves me? The burden of unlimited freedom quietly becomes anxiety. Now compare this with many collectivistic societies like India and China, where identity is often deeply tied to family systems, relationships, social harmony, and collective belonging. In many Indian or Chinese households, life decisions are rarely completely individual. Parents may influence education, career choices, marriage decisions, financial priorities, even living arrangements. Family is not simply part of life. Family is central to life. And this creates something emotionally powerful that many individualistic societies are slowly losing: belonging. In collectivistic cultures, people are rarely completely alone. Relatives remain involved, parents stay connected, extended families remain emotionally intertwined, communities monitor each other, social life remains relational rather than isolated. When someone struggles financially, family often helps. When someone gets sick, relatives gather. When someone succeeds, the success is shared collectively. This creates emotional cushioning, social buffering, a sense that life is shared. And psychologically, this matters enormously. Human beings evolved inside tribes, villages, and deeply interconnected social systems. For most of history, survival depended on belonging. Isolation from the group could literally mean death. Our nervous systems are still built for connection. This is why loneliness hurts so deeply, why rejection feels physical, why abandonment creates panic, why emotional isolation can become psychologically unbearable. The human brain treats social disconnection almost like danger. And this is partly why many highly individualistic societies struggle with rising loneliness, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and suicide, despite enormous wealth and freedom. There is another uncomfortable pattern researchers and sociologists have tried to understand for decades. Why do some highly individualistic societies, especially countries like the United States, report extremely high levels of emotional isolation, depression, and suicide? Part of the answer may lie in how suffering is psychologically processed. In individualistic cultures, distress is often internalized. People are taught to handle problems privately, independently, internally. Emotional pain becomes self-blame, shame, hopelessness, anxiety, overthinking, and silent depression. People collapse inwardly. And when emotional suffering becomes isolated inside the individual psyche, it can become invisible to others. A man may suffer silently for years without anyone fully realizing how bad things have become. A teenager may smile online while internally feeling empty. A successful professional may quietly lose the will to live while continuing to function outwardly. At the same time, countries like the United States also have another important factor: access. Access to firearms, access to lethal means, access to substances, access to highly deadly methods during moments of emotional crisis. Research repeatedly shows that suicide is not only about emotional pain, it is also heavily influenced by access to highly lethal means during impulsive emotional states. A temporary moment of despair combined with immediate access to a firearm can become irreversible within minutes. This matters enormously psychologically and sociologically. Now compare this with many collectivistic societies like India and China. In these cultures, emotional suffering often becomes more relational and externalized rather than silently internalized. Distress may emerge through family conflict, anger, irritability, aggression, emotional outbursts, interpersonal tension, or somatic complaints. Pain spills outward. People argue, families become emotionally involved, communities notice distress, suffering becomes collective rather than fully private. And importantly, many collectivistic societies historically had lower access to highly lethal weapons like firearms. Emotional crises therefore often unfold differently. Aggression may emerge socially rather than becoming immediate self-destruction or homicide through lethal means. This does not mean collectivistic societies do not experience suicide. They absolutely do. Some Asian countries have historically struggled with high suicide rates for different cultural and economic reasons. Nor does it mean collectivistic societies are emotionally healthier overall. They carry their own forms of suffering: pressure, suppression, control, shame, loss of individuality, emotional dependence. The deeper point is this: different societies shape suffering differently. Some societies create isolated suffering. Others create collective suffering. Some people implode inwardly. Others explode outwardly. And access to lethal means can determine whether emotional pain becomes self-destruction, interpersonal violence, or prolonged psychological struggle. Extreme individualism creates one kind of pain. Extreme collectivism creates another. Different symptoms, different emotional languages, same human struggle underneath. The struggle to belong while still remaining yourself. There's a young Indian engineer living in Bangalore who secretly dreams about moving abroad because he feels emotionally trapped by family expectations. His education path was heavily influenced by parents. Career decisions feel collectively negotiated. Marriage pressure quietly hangs over his future. At night, he watches videos of independent life in Canada or America and imagines freedom. No one controlling me. My own apartment. My own decisions. My own life. Now imagine another scene. A 35-year-old software developer sits alone in a Toronto high-rise during winter. Snow falls quietly outside the window. He earns good money. He has freedom, privacy, independence. Nobody interferes with his life. And yet he hasn't had a truly meaningful emotional conversation in weeks. Parents live far away. Neighbors barely know him. Dating feels transactional. Friendships feel temporary. Life feels efficient, but emotionally cold. And sometimes late at night, he watches videos of crowded Indian weddings, multi-generational homes, cousins laughing together, family dinners full of noise and warmth. And he feels longing. Each side romanticizes what the other side has. Neither fully sees the hidden psychological cost. This is why human beings are emotionally conflicted. We do not simply want freedom or belonging. We want both simultaneously. We want independence without loneliness, connection without control, community without pressure. freedom without abandonment. And maintaining this balance is incredibly difficult. In many individualistic societies, hyper-independence has become idealized. People say things like, "I don't need anyone. I handle things myself. I stay in my own lane." But sometimes hyper-independence is not strength. Sometimes it is emotional survival. Many people become self-sufficient because they learned emotionally that depending on others felt unsafe, disappointing, or burdensome. And eventually entire societies become filled with individuals who know how to function, but struggle deeply with intimacy, vulnerability, and emotional belonging. People know how to achieve, but not how to emotionally connect. Loneliness becomes normalized. You see it everywhere now. People eating alone while scrolling endlessly. Couples sitting together while emotionally disconnected. Teenagers spending more time online than physically with others. Adults replacing friendship with productivity. Modern life increasingly organizes human beings around efficiency rather than belonging. Work becomes identity. Achievement becomes self-worth. Busyness becomes status. And slowly people become emotionally exhausted without fully understanding why. Now compare this to collectivistic family systems, where emotional closeness remains strong. But psychological boundaries sometimes become blurry. Parents may sacrifice enormously for children. Families may remain deeply involved emotionally. But individuality can quietly become restricted. A fully grown adult may still struggle making independent decisions without family approval. Personal dreams may be sacrificed for harmony. Emotional guilt becomes powerful. Risk-taking decreases. Independent thinking weakens. This affects entire societies too. Innovation often requires people willing to psychologically separate from collective norms. Entrepreneurs, inventors, artists, and visionaries frequently tolerate uncertainty, rejection, and social disapproval in pursuit of something new. But highly collectivistic systems sometimes discourage this naturally because social harmony matters more than radical individuality. This creates another paradox. The same collectivism that protects people emotionally can sometimes reduce innovation and personal growth. The same individualism that drives innovation can emotionally isolate people. Both systems solve problems. Both systems create suffering. And perhaps modern humanity keeps making the mistake of believing one extreme can fully save us. It cannot. Because human beings need both freedom and belonging. Too much freedom without connection creates loneliness. Too much belonging without freedom creates suffocation. This tension becomes especially visible in younger generations across the world. Young people today are caught between collapsing collectivistic systems and rising hyper-individualistic global culture. Social media exposes them to radically different values, identities, and lifestyles than previous generations ever experienced. A teenager in Mumbai now compares herself not only to classmates, but to influencers in Los Angeles, entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, celebrities in Seoul, and luxury lifestyles in Dubai. The psychological environment has become globalized, and with globalization comes emotional confusion. Traditional values weaken, modern pressures intensify, expectations multiply. Young people hear contradictory messages simultaneously. Honor your family. Follow your dreams. Stay loyal. Be independent. Think collectively. Stand out individually. The nervous system becomes stretched between competing realities. This may explain why so many modern people feel internally fragmented. They are trying to satisfy emotionally incompatible demands all at once. To be deeply connected, yet fully independent. To belong, yet never depend too much. To achieve individually, yet never abandon family. And perhaps this impossible balancing act is exhausting millions of people quietly. There is another hidden layer to this conversation too: economics. Highly individualistic societies often produce stronger innovation and economic growth because people are incentivized to compete individually. Personal achievement drives ambition. Competition fuels productivity. But this same competition also creates enormous psychological pressure. Human worth becomes tied to achievement and economic success. People stop asking, "Am I connected?" and start asking, "Am I successful enough?" Meanwhile, collectivistic societies preserve emotional safety nets through family systems, but sometimes weaken personal accountability or reduce risk-taking behavior necessary for innovation. Again, balance matters. Human beings thrive when they feel both emotionally supported and psychologically empowered, not abandoned, not emotionally trapped, supported and capable. Healthy families understand this intuitively. Good parents provide emotional security while gradually encouraging independence. They support children without psychologically imprisoning them. Maybe societies need the same thing. Communities strong enough to prevent emotional isolation. Freedom strong enough to encourage individuality and growth. Because psychologically, human beings deteriorate at both extremes. A society of isolated individuals becomes emotionally fragmented. A society of excessive dependence becomes psychologically stagnant. And maybe this is why modern humanity increasingly feels unstable. In the West, loneliness rises dramatically. In collectivistic societies, younger generations increasingly rebel against emotional control and family pressure. Everyone is searching for balance, but nobody fully knows how to create it anymore. Technology complicates this even further. Social media gives people the illusion of connection without the depth of true belonging. Tiny dopamine hits from likes and notifications replace deeper forms of intimacy. The brain receives stimulation, but not nourishment. And slowly, modern life trains people to confuse visibility with connection. But being seen online is not the same thing as being emotionally known. You can have millions of followers and still feel profoundly alone. You can live inside a crowded family system and still feel emotionally unseen. Because true belonging is not merely physical proximity, it is emotional safety. And emotional safety requires something modern societies increasingly struggle to provide: presence. Real human presence. Undistracted presence. Emotionally available presence. There is something heartbreaking about how many people today secretly crave very simple things. Someone listening fully, a shared meal, a feeling of home, a sense that their existence matters beyond productivity. Human beings are starving emotionally in different ways depending on culture. In America and Canada, many starve from isolation. In India and China, some starve from lack of individuality. And yet both sides misunderstand each other completely. One side says, "At least you have freedom." The other side says, "At least you have people." Neither realizes that both freedom and people can become sources of suffering when pushed to extremes. This is why wisdom rarely lives at the extremes. Nature itself survives through balance. The human psyche is no different. We need solitude, but not isolation. We need connection, but not suffocation. We need freedom, but not abandonment. We need belonging, but not emotional imprisonment. Perhaps emotional maturity is not becoming completely independent from others, nor becoming completely dependent on others. Perhaps it is learning interdependence. The ability to remain yourself while staying deeply connected. The ability to receive support without surrendering responsibility. The ability to love without losing identity. The ability to belong without disappearing psychologically. That may be one of the most important psychological skills of the future. Because modern societies increasingly push people toward extremes: extreme individualism, extreme tribalism, extreme self-focus, extreme dependence, extreme isolation. And extremes almost always create suffering eventually. Maybe the tragedy of modern humanity is not that people suffer. Human beings have always suffered. The tragedy is that many people no longer understand the invisible systems shaping their suffering. An American man may think his loneliness is purely personal failure without realizing he was raised inside a culture normalizing emotional isolation. An Indian woman may think her guilt comes from weakness Without realizing, she was raised inside collectivistic systems emphasizing sacrifice and duty. Culture silently enters the nervous system. It shapes how people love, how they argue, how they dream, how they define success, how they experience shame, how they seek comfort, how they process suffering. And once you see this, human behavior becomes less simplistic. You stop asking, "What's wrong with people?" and begin asking, "What kind of world shaped them?" That shift changes everything. It creates compassion. Because suddenly the lonely entrepreneur in New York and the emotionally trapped son in Delhi no longer seem completely different. Both are trying to solve the same human problem from opposite directions. How do I belong without losing myself? That may be the central emotional question of our time. And perhaps the healthiest future will not come from blindly copying either extreme. Not pure hyper-individualism, not pure collectivistic dependence, but integration. Communities that preserve belonging without destroying individuality. Families that support without controlling. Societies that encourage ambition without sacrificing emotional connection. Cultures where vulnerability is not weakness. Cultures where independence does not require emotional isolation. Because human beings are healthiest when they feel two things simultaneously, free and emotionally held. Maybe that is the balance humanity has been searching for all along. So after this video ends, maybe ask yourself something quietly honest. Are you lonely because you became too independent, or are you emotionally stuck because you became too dependent? And somewhere between those two extremes, what would a healthier life actually look like for you? Because maybe healing begins there, not in rejecting freedom, not in rejecting belonging, but in learning how to hold both without letting either consume your humanity. Thank you for watching. Please comment, share, and subscribe for more.